Hello, and welcome to the Off-Meta Umineko Read-Along podcast, a weekly podcast where I guide my friends and first-time readers through my favorite story of all time, the highly acclaimed murder mystery visual novel Umineko When They Cry. We're discussing its narrative and themes, and it will work together with our community to try and solve its various mysteries. Hope you'll join us on this exciting journey as we delve into the witch's cat box. I'm Kyle J, and joining me on our one-way trip to Rokkenjiima, we have our readers, James Capelli, Ben, Hayley, and Becca. Welcome, y'all. So, how was your read this week?
I've developed depression now, so
That's good.
thanks for that, Kyle. That's it. Yeah, we can wrap.
Yeah, pretty much.
And that's the whole episode.
All right. We'll see you all next time on Umineko Read Along podcast, where we go. No, I thought it was a good read. I really enjoyed it. I still didn't have like. I guess I don't have feelings sometimes, but like I just thought it was a good read. I thought it was the whole thing of me shitting on the last episode. What paid off here in the terms of like, oh, I just needed to get to here for it to really make sense. But I still think that it was too much exposition for what actually happened.
Fair.
I agree. I think this episode was longer than it needed to be, too. And it was a short one.
I think that the previous episode was longer than it needed to
sense.
be for this payoff, is what I'm saying.
I gotcha. I guess since I wasn't here for last one, like you're saying that we probably should have merged them together. For me, them reading all bunched together, because like I finished reading for 4.2, I think the night after you guys recorded 4.2, so to me it all blends together.
Yeah, and that is a long reading if you do that there.
Mm-hmm.
But like how the three of us did it was like split up big long reading that Hayley and I shit on for most of the time, and then this reading where I'm like, oh, here's the payoff of all that shit. So like I do respect it more for what it did now, at least. However, I still didn't get those like heart-wrenching emotions because I think they just dragged it on too long for me to care.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of don't get those anyway, Ben. I don't know.
Yeah, that's fair.
I mean, I empathize with the characters, right? But I don't feel particularly bummed out by, I don't know, it doesn't stick with me, I suppose.
You mean for this episode that we're talking about right now, or last week?
Or anything.
Really?
in the moment, I'm like, oh, that's sad, but like, it doesn't. I don't know. Yeah, but I really thought that you were trolling when you just came on now and were like, I really enjoyed it, Ben, because of how we talked about last time that there was nothing for you in that last one. So it's interesting to hear you say that you feel like there was stuff for you in this one. And I'm curious what that is, because I still feel like this was almost, like you're saying, a continuation of the last episode.
It was a continuation, but had payoff, I think.
Right.
While the one last time had no payoff and it was all build up to something that I didn't like. And even if I don't like love this part of the story, it at least made me feel better than last time while reading it. I don't have that many notes in here because it's just not what I like to talk about.
Yeah.
But I still appreciate it for what it did with developing characters and getting us to really get an understanding of one character that we've only known on a surface level, Maria, for so long. Like, and we knew like there was more to them, but this is where we finally start to get like.
I get it. Yeah.
And I'll talk about this later. I think that Maria has something huge to do with this.
Yeah.
It's the only thing that makes sense.
You also predicted it, and this
I did.
chapter was going to be the Maria heavy one.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And everyone knows how much I love Maria.
Your
so
favorite character.
I'm
Yep.
favorite character. So I'm interested to see what happens here.
It's so harrowing. And I think I messaged Kyle a few weeks ago. I was like, I really genuinely do not remember what happens in the rest of episode 4, at least anime-wise, from when I watched it. But I do remember really harrowing Maria shit and her kind of heel turn. And was very excited for you guys to get to the heel turn part. And I'm glad to hear that you kind of come around on her. because, yeah, we're barely scraping the tip of the iceberg with her.
Yeah, I think so.
We're going to get a lot of context in the next few chapters, I'm pretty sure, where the evil, dark, twisted, smirking Maria is probably the real version of her. I think the story will probably play back and forth with that, but...
Yeah, I mean, also, people can contain multitudes. They don't, same thing at all times.
It's clearly a child wrestling with her defense mechanisms and how to cope with what she's been dealt.
Yeah, she has gained some very toxic coping mechanisms, for sure.
I wouldn't say toxic. I would say unhealthy.
Yeah, I mean, well, we'll get more into it.
She's too young to be toxic. She's not dragging other people down yet. Unless we learn that this is all just a machination of her.
I was about to say, isn't that your suspicion? You guys just both said that you think Maria's the key to this.
Well...
Is getting her family murdered on an island toxic?
Throughout all my theories, I'm still going to keep, Team Fantasy alive as a possibility, because to just shut it down is not fun as a reader.
Disagree.
Hey, speaking of reader, why in our notes do you refer to us as your quote-unquote readers? Why can't we just be regular readers? Why is that a thing? I'm just really like...
That is something that won't make any sense until episode 5, I don't think, so...
This game's going to get very meta at one point.
Like it's not already. Oh my god.
Yeah, like it's not already.
Yeah, my very last comment on this is in the notes file that we put together before the episode, is that I might be coming back around to Maria Donnet, because I think that's where I was in episode 1.
We do have the notes to see.
I'd put it at the general thoughts at the end, but that's kind of what we're talking about now, so I just figured I should slot it in. I think she might have orchestrated it all.
Maria and Kumasawa done it?
Yeah.
Speaking of meta, what if we're all actually in the universe canonically, reading about all of this stuff, and then we as the players have to go in and figure out what happened?
Yeah, I could see that.
Oh man, does it finally become a game?
An ARG, yeah.
Kyle did say we are eventually presented with a single choice to make eventually,
Yeah.
And it's okay, because I've already solved what that is and what the ending of the whole story is going to be.
Oh, right.
I talked about it in 4.1. You don't need to look at me like I'm crazy.
I know, I remember.
You remember because I'm right, and you're like, God damn, Capelli figured it out already, huh?
I track both your right and wrong predictions, so I can rub your face in either one, so it's fine.
That's fun.
I'm so excited to hear about the right and wrong predictions at the end of this podcast.
No, I don't track them as much as I should. I really should keep a better record of them.
When it comes time to recap what we got right, we have all our notes to go back on and be like, that's really what we thought, or we called it.
Yep, I'm really excited to hear that.
All right, well, this week, we are continuing episode 4, Alliance of the Golden Witch, with about 2.5 hours of VN. Ending on the line, he peeled open one to show her. A black, blunt automatic pistol peeked its face out. At which the clock shows 9:48 p.m., and that is videos 61 to 63 of the YouTube playlist. If you haven't caught up to that point yet, go ahead and stop the podcast and catch up before joining us. And as a note of warning, this segment of reading has some very intense scenes involving child abuse, bullying, and discussions of suicide. So please read and listen to this discussion with your own mental health and limits in mind. Our story resumes with a flashback on the future timeline, where Ange is still at St. Lucia Academy. Her magic powers having grown substantially, and Ange is now able to summon all 7 sisters of Purgatory at once, and have them playing around noisily while she studies for a history test at a location from her memory. Marie and Sakutaro arrive, and they all play Shiritori, a Japanese word game, together. Later, Ange is confronted by the other students in her class for failing the test, despite them even giving her a copy of the test in advance to study from. Because the school uses collective responsibility, Ange's poor score is dragging down the average of the entire class, a fact the girls in her class love to use as an excuse to bully her. Ange's classmates arrange a special study session for her during lunch and after school, but only use this time to further bully her, forcing her to write and read a humiliating letter denigrating herself. Ange tries to escape into fantasy, imagining the 7 sisters of Purgatory, Maria, and Sakutaro, but the girls of the class pull her back into reality by her hair. There are jeers now implying that Ange should kill herself. Finally, at her breaking point, Ange orders the 7 sisters of Purgatory to kill her bullies. However, they are unable to do so. Ange laments that she always knew that magic was an empty delusion. One after another, she asks each of the 7 Sisters of Purgatory to carry out her order, and when they fail to do so, imagines them turning to glass and shattering. Satan tries to explain that the anti-magic power here is too strong, but Ange is having none of that. After all, isn't killing humans in front of their faces their purpose as furniture? If they can't even do that, they might as well die. When only Mammon, Ange's best friend, remains, Ange begs her to kill them. However, even Mammon says that furniture can't do something their master isn't capable of doing. Ange is not capable of murder. If and only if Ange was truly prepared to dirty her own hands, could the 7 Sisters of Purgatory help her. Ange falls into despair, saying that they're all just delusions. Pretend friends she created inside of her heart in her loneliness. And Mammon admits it, taking the abuse that Ange is redirecting from her bullies to feel better. Being used, denied, and thrown away, that too is the duty of furniture.
First of all, Kyle, we of the Lost fandom refer to resume with flashbacks of the future as flash forwards, so get your terminology right, all right?
Okay, cool.
Secondly, the author's trying to get me to like the Sisters of Purgatory. It's not going to work. They're not interesting.
I don't know. I was kind of coming round to them, except for the youngest two. They really do feel like an afterthought.
Yeah, I mean, it's 7 people. It's a lot. Like, they don't get enough screen time to really commit to, like, liking all 7. I think, largely, like, Mammon's the one I think that has, like, the most presence here, and I think she works as a character for the most part.
Even when it was just... Who's the oldest?
Lucifer.
Yeah, Lucifer, yeah. Again, don't care. Even when Lucifer had all the screen time in Chapter 3, they're all very similar to each other with these slight differences in the 7 sins. Like, it's fine as a narrative construct of villains, but thirdly, I guess, the author is building a strong alternative to people on Team Fantasy. We may find Maria's at fault for much of the original murders, but I'm also wondering how the Beato who shows up in these segments to Maria, how does she manifest, right? Chapter 1 does a big job of saying how limited her magic is and how she's confined to the island. And like, while this is technically in the future from that point, you start getting into having to find what a grimoire is and what a tome is and how does that manifest as magic. But like, if we're just having Ange's flash forward, back, whatever you want to call it, like, how are we getting scenes where she is witnessing Maria's conversations with Beato? Is she? Is it just us, the reader, who's getting that? Sorry, reader, who's getting that side? Like, it's just weird. It's confusing. You can say that about a lot of these little things with how it happens.
The timeline here is really hard to follow. I'm probably going to do a breakdown of some of it because it's definitely not straightforward. Like, for example, I think in a lot of these scenes, some of the Maria scenes are also flashbacks to part of her diary entries, where she's reacting to the first time Ange spurned her, and it's just being kind of replayed in the thematically appropriate time where Ange is now in this timeline spurning the 7 Sisters.
And if that's the case, like, how does Beatrice show up?
Yeah, those scenes could have been played on the island itself, or maybe not. We don't actually know. We don't have the context to know for sure.
Yeah.
Well, because, real quick, because Beatrice shows up only during the Rosa scene later, right?
Yes.
That's the only time she shows up. So I took that as Maria wrote about seeing Beatrice in her diary.
Or perhaps went to the island next year and talked to Beatrice about that event then, possibly.
Okay, that rationale I can understand, because otherwise the idea of Maria mentally or magically connecting with Beatrice while she's home on the mainland, and they say Beatrice didn't have the strength to manifest elsewhere, is weird. It's confusing. I don't like it.
Yeah, it would be contradictory to things I've said previously. Not that everything is exactly...
Yeah, not that stopped them before.
Yeah.
The thing that bothered me about this scene, I mean, okay, yes, bullying is horrible, but like, why is the school even let this happen in the first place? Like, what kind of school lets other classmates book time out and insist that other people join, like, for an extracurricular? What's that like?
Yeah, they kind of explain it a little bit. Like, the thing that they say in the story is that the school uses this collective system where they kind of leave things to the group to self-regulate, it seems like, as the method they use for teaching, which is ridiculous. But also the other issue is I don't think a lot of these things are required. Like when we're talking about like, oh, they make Angie stay for these study sessions. I don't think she's technically forced to any more so than she is like socially required to, because the entire class is saying you have to do this, and Angie can't really break free of those bounds.
Okay. I don't like the averages as an explanation, that grades thing. That just
I think this is just a lot of how Japanese schools worked. But my grasp of that is understanding it from, other anime, which exaggerates for its own needs. But also, kids also just suck, and they will lie to leadership to get what they want. So, we're gonna rent out the room so that we can study and help our dear classmate to get a better test grade. And then they abuse, which is why the teacher shows up at the end and everything, and gets kind of helps end the situation.
Yeah, I kind of read it as they're giving themselves enough plausible deniability to be like, we're just helping her. And also, it's schmancy rich person, private school, weird woo-woo stuff.
Yeah.
And the children of rich people would never do anything wrong.
I do want to say one thing, though. Angie did fuck up pretty bad. Like, this is not like Angie did nothing wrong. Like, Angie should have maybe stepped her shit up.
I'll give you that. They literally gave her the test that she didn't.
Here's Kyle, are you missing the part where she says, yeah, they shared the test with her, but they redacted all the answers first, but they didn't do that for themselves?
That I don't know if that's true. I'm not sure if that's the case, honestly. I don't think they redacted the answer. I think they just got a copy of the test and they gave it to everyone.
Okay, that might be right. Like, now that you say that, that does sound like what it said. But I read it as I took it to mean that they had the answers and were purposely withholding them from her.
Yeah, I don't think that's the case, but it's possible.
Yeah, no, I think that what Kyle says is right, that it was just a blank test. But it was, I don't know how much I agree that she fucked up here, really. She's going through all kinds of shit at school anyway. Like, even just to be able to look up the answers, it's probably a lot for her to be able to, like, what is she, like 14 here? I don't know.
The description she gave is that she said that she got distracted playing games in her head and she didn't actually do enough study. And the other issue was that because everyone's scores rose because they had access to the test ahead of time, even though her score did rise, it's not like she didn't improve none. She just didn't improve enough compared to everyone else who was able to study directly off of the test previously. And so she still looked bad relatively. She was never going to get a good result there.
That, and I think that's kind of the point, is that she is almost non-functional at this school.
That is true.
Like, her entire family was murdered and she's been abused by her one surviving relative her entire life. Like, how functional would you be, even if you had something like schoolwork to concentrate on? I think that's exactly kind of the point.
Yeah, I agree.
It is interesting. I was speaking time earlier, trying to think about, like, from the perspective of the other students, trying to understand, like, this girl is very much a loner, and obviously they do bully her, but then, like, did they have any intentions to help her in any of these study sessions? And it's just that their perspective is so different from hers because she is very pushed down to the point where, like, as we said, she's barely functional, and she's just so out of it that, like, they can't even try and help her in a way that's meaningful. So they bring her to the classroom, right? And they're like, okay, you need to apologize. And then she is so non-reactive. It's so strange. I'm trying to imagine, like, what would you even think seeing somebody like that?
As a teenager. As a privileged teenager.
Yeah. How much context could you even have? I mean, I want to make this clear. I'm not here to, like, say that, like, obviously these people are blameless and they're bullying. Like, some of this bullying is really egregious.
Yeah, and I understand what you're saying too, because it is, as a teenager, even if you were well-intentioned, it would be really baffling to see someone so withdrawn in such in such a state that it would be really difficult to know what to do, how to help them. But in this case, I think it is so outright diabolically evil.
Yes,
Some of the things that these girls are doing and saying to her, that there's sadistic is a great word for it, Capelli. Like, I don't think there's a lot of room for interpretation here to be like, oh, maybe we're seeing it through Angie's eyes, so maybe it seems more harsh than it is, perspective or whatever. But no, it sounds pretty overt.
Yeah, I think especially at this part, we've gone way over the scale of like just bullying. I mean, we're literally getting to the point where this is like, hey, maybe you should kill yourself. You're being too much of a burden on our class. Real wild.
Yeah.
So I think one of the hardest things for me about this was it went, and I'm not here to say that this couldn't happen in real life, but I also want to say it felt unrealistic in a sense of going so over the top that it took me out of it, and maybe that's why I just didn't have as much sympathy towards it, because it felt more like something absurd happening. Which, yes, the story is about the absurd in some senses, but it didn't make me... It felt like it went to the extremes to make me try to care for this as opposed to make a realistic story. And I'm not saying that this couldn't happen in real life. I want to be very clear about that. I'm just saying that, like, there's the way that they talk about it, and maybe it's some translation stuff, but just was like, I just don't see kids of that age saying these things, being able to make these kind of plans. And you know me, I love kids. They're the best. But like it just didn't click with me in a sense that made me feel like this feels realistic and like whatnot. But if I have to suspend my disbelief in the sense of like this happened, yeah, it's awful. Like, it's tragic, and that would mess anybody up, and explains a lot about Ange.
Yes, she's like a very disaffected, flat personality is kind of become is because she's kind of shut everything down. She's like, no, I'm only the facts of the world now. I am the Reddit atheist, Latip Fedora now. Like, the reason why I was remembering this thing I was bringing up about how Angie kind of brings some of this onto herself is because part of her coping mechanism, the imagining of the Seven Sisters, a lot of the times when we hear the Seven Sisters voicing her complaints, you can see a lot of her self-justifying in those voices. Like, look at these people not valuing the true essence of education, caring about their grades. And it's like, Angie, you can definitely get a feeling where you're voicing her justifications and further alienating her from her peers in that way.
That's why they're sins.
Yeah.
And they all play into the different versions of the sins based on who's telling her the reasoning, which I think is clever and good writing.
Those two words don't belong in this podcast.
What, good writing?
Yes.
You saying that my summaries aren't good writing, Hayley?
Kyle. No, that's not what I was saying.
I know.
I think it has its moments.
It
Hayley.
does. It does have its moments. It does. I actually kind of didn't see this as them planning it, Ben. If I think back to when I was a teenager, things escalate and get out of hand real fast.
Yep.
It just takes one person to just go just a little bit more, and then another person just goes just a little bit more. I kind of saw that happening.
What's the name of that experiment with the college? And they had like some kids like imprisoned, and the others were
the Stanford prison experiment.
Yeah. All right, you're talking a couple of years difference between those kids and these kids. Like,
sure,
trust me when I say, sure, the story may exaggerated a little bit, but this shit happens.
And that's fair. I mean, I'm just kind of sharing my perspective on it, and maybe why it didn't affect me, because none of that, like, was I bullied in school a little bit? Yeah, probably. I probably didn't realize it. Like, that's just my autistic ass being like, I don't even recognize this. So the fact that like it's just so overt here maybe is the reason that I'm like, there was no hiding. And I think that's kind of the thing that really got me, is that it was so overt that it took me out of it. Not that it can't happen, though.
Mm-hmm.
I have this one completely non sequitur thought in the notes, but I did think it was a funny touch that the one sister who kind of urges Angie to like not react immediately. Like some of the sisters tend to spur her on or like give her advice based on like envy or anger or greediness, but then Belphegor will tell her like, you know, it's okay if you like think about this, and they're all like, yeah, you would say that, you're sloth, you don't want to do anything. It's like, no, maybe she has a point, maybe you should think about this a little bit, Angie.
Yeah, no, I like it. It does play into what you were saying about each sister representing like the way that they so what you were saying about good writing, the way that they each have dialogue that reflects like their sin. That is, I hadn't actually noticed that, but that was funny.
With all the seven sisters of Purgatory gone, only Maria and Sakutaro remain. Maria comforts Sakutaro. The sisters were still alive, just deeply injured, having been forcibly vacated from reality by Angie's disbelief. Maria accuses Angie of violating the treaty of Mariage Sorcier, and Angie begs for Maria and Sakutaro to give up on the witch nonsense and disappear on their own. Even if they are just her delusions, she doesn't want to have to erase them. Angie then begins denying Sakutaro's existence as anything other than a stuffed animal in her mind, causing Sakutaro to experience great pain. Angie calls out Maria for puppeteering Sakutaro's stuffed animal, pretending that it's a real friend, denying him their friendship and Maria's magic. Sakutaro's form begins to fade, and Maria cries for Angie to stop burning him with her anti-magic toxin. Angie recalls a memory from long ago, when Maria first introduced her to her friend Sakutaro, and how she had, in her innocent cruelty, had denied the existence of Maria's only friend to her face, and caused her to cry and expel Angie from Mariage Sorcier. Finally returning to reality, Angie admits that she was living in a daydream, and that she should have died that day in 1986. No, she did die that day, and her soul that was killed merely remained locked up in this cage of flesh. Having lost her family, her friends, and even the ability to escape into fantasy, she begs for someone to end this life. As she begins to pass out, the teacher finally notices what is going on and intervenes. Angie resolves that she will never again seek salvation from daydreams. Here in the real world, the only ones who can save a human are other humans. Watching on, Maria and Sakutaro lament that if this is what Angie believes, then it will be so. She may never be able to find happiness. While Angie may be growing up or moving on, Maria and Sakutaro will always be there should she choose to remember them.
Magic functioning on a belief system, like that's how I see Schrodinger's cat box being relevant from here on. And man, I can't imagine a premise that is less interesting.
Magic being a belief system. Oh, okay.
I think I did predict this earlier.
Right, like what if you believe it, that's fine, but I don't have to believe it. If I don't believe it, that doesn't mean that what you believe is wrong. It's very much like very juvenile. I can believe what I want without stepping on your toes. Relevant. And truth is relevancy.
No, I get that. I was wondering what you didn't.
What I was meaning.
What
Gotcha.
You weren't interested in.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I was connecting that dot for myself. Sorry.
In a story that's all about like the motif is it's either magic or it's not. To present the idea of like, oh well, you can believe it, but I don't have to believe it, and that doesn't mean it's like, oh my god, the story's gonna do whatever it needs to do to not commit one way or the other, and that's just boring to me. But you know, the story hasn't really begun apparently, so I'm still here for it.
Yeah, my counterpoints to that would be that's the conflict of the story, but is that the point of the story that it has to be one or the other? But yeah, again, as Kyle has mentioned, we haven't even really begun the real story yet, so I wouldn't bank on this being where it lands. Hopefully there are some twists and turns to still keep you compelled.
Capelli.
Oh,
yeah, Capelli.
Damn it.
Yeah, I mean, I would say this entire future timeline is taking a very mystery perspective of things, right? Like, Angie is explicitly laying out, like, here is what magic is. It's delusions. Like, full stop. I'm going to explain every part. Like, this is imaginary friends. This is delusions. This is daydreaming. Like,
I'm really confused by these segments because of the time jumping. I really feel like I need a timeline to understand what is going on. Like, or just the sprites to change for Angie, so I understand. Like, are we seeing what Angie saw then and she's reminiscing about it now, or are we experiencing then as real time? Like, are we back then with her? Like, because this whole thing of like Angie remembers a time when she denied Sakutaro was like in the middle of the scene of her denying Sakutaro. So like, was that her remembering that, or was that a different time that she had also denied? Like, I'm so lost. Like, was she?
Yeah.
I just don't understand. Like, how old was she when the shattering of the sisters occurred? Like, what was? Because I thought that was in the classroom, but then there's a part where the way it's worded makes me think that it's
that. I think that did. Yeah.
Was like Maria. Like Angie would have been 6. I don't know. I'm really lost.
Let me see if I can break down the timeline. So when Angie was probably like 3, Maria introduces her to magic and to Sakutaro and all that. And Angie, at that time, denies Sakutaro's existence, gets booted from Maria Sorcerer, all that jazz. And then Maria goes home, and then in the scene we're about to see, that all plays out. And then a year or so later, the Rokkenjiima incident happens, everyone dies. Then Angie goes to this St. Lucia's Academy, and that's several years after the incident, I imagine. So Angie is probably 12, 13 or something in these scenes, maybe older. It could be as early as 12, 13, I would say. And then that's when she's reading Maria's diary, and then she summons the 7 sisters. Then this scene happens where she refutes them, and they reference the earlier time when she did that at the same time, which, yeah, it's very confusing. And then in the future,
oh my god,
she resummons the 7 sisters and remembers the time in school when she summoned the 7 sisters and refuted them.
But I really thought that she wasn't even introduced to Mariage Sorcière until she was a teenager. So that's where I was really lost.
It happened on the island, when she was playing with Maria. She introduced her to magic and stuff like that then.
Okay.
Yeah, it was when they were basically playing as kids.
Okay.
But so part of what you missed last week, Capelli, with me absolutely going off on that reading, was that there were flashbacks within fucking flashbacks, and that should fucking happen. I'm so mad about it. Like, it's so bad because you don't easily follow along, and I stopped caring. Like, at that point, like, you either need to lay out explicitly what time period, like how old these people are, for us to get a sense of where these line up in conjunction with what you just read and what you read before that, or don't do it at all.
Yeah, it's really difficult writing to understand. I don't know. I think that the visuals don't help because I can make it make sense in my head, but then when I'm looking at a version of Angie that is older or younger than she's supposed to be, like that's when I get confused. I really struggled with the first, I don't know, most of this reading. It only was really when we came back to present day, like 1998, is it that they're in? I think.
Yeah.
That I started to enjoy the reading again.
I will say I also was extremely confused on the timeline, to the point that one of my notes on my phone is just, Kyle, can you explain this? And you have done a good job. But I did actually finally get it when she, on the boat in 1998, she was like, oh, I remember. I hurt her feelings. This is all because of me. And then I was like, okay. Yeah. There's a thread here. It's just incredibly tangled.
Yeah.
It is a little frustrating on a first read, just because I was like, especially because I kind of agree with Ben in terms of, like, I think maybe this whole last episode and this episode's readings all together would have made a little bit more sense, because I was really struggling to pick up on at the very beginning of this reading, Maria in her room angry at Angie, for denying Sakutaro, because I couldn't remember. Yeah. Anyway, I think altogether it would have made a little bit more sense, or at least been a little bit easier to follow if we didn't have such a big gap in between.
That's fair.
But that's not really a criticism. That's just I think that contributed to the confusion.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think this part is confusingly written. I think definitely an edit could have been made here to make this more clarified. I think the author was probably trying to these scenes are like similar and emotionally resonant, and therefore I'll reveal that the thing happened in the past happened in this time when they remember it in the present. It's like, yeah, you can do that, but maybe don't. Because it is a very confusing read for that reason.
But yeah, I think the most interesting part of this is I don't know, because I'm picking up on threads that I'm excited to see where they lead, because I understand Capelli's frustration with it feeling like a cop-out to be like, a belief-based system means that everybody's right and no one is wrong, and also everybody is also kind of wrong. But what I really like and think is a little bit more interesting than that is Ange thinking about it in the terms of daydreams and reality instead of mystery versus fantasy. It's a bit of a different spin on it, even though it is kind of a derivation of that. I don't really know what it's supposed to mean yet, and it is one of those things where I'm like, I don't know if that'll go anywhere, but
the stakes of it being human lives is why the idea is so frustrating. It's one thing to be like, it's the political commentary, or it's a philosophical debate, right? It's like, no, people are literally dying. And then you can say, oh, but are they? And it's just like, pick a lane and tell your story through that avenue.
Are rich people people? Are rich people human?
Yeah, there's 0 humans on that island, actually.
Oh, I guess all of those servants died too. But they're furniture. They're not human. Anyway.
Yeah. What a rich person thing for you to say, Becca.
Yeah, I've got so much furniture here in my mansion.
You say sitting on your human chair.
Made of humans.
Yeah, I'm sitting on top of a person who's, just on all fours, and then there's another person just leaning up against my back for me to lean against. And then there's someone off camera fanning me with a leaf too.
Yeah, we've all seen them this whole time. I'm glad you explained that to the listener.
They deserve to have the visual.
Yeah, I see what you mean, Capelli, because it is. One thing I think is interesting is that Maria and Ange are looking at magic from a just completely different side than what the story had been about up to this point, right? The magic that we're talking about has to do a lot with a big murder mystery, right? And then separately you have Maria and Ange who are like, no, this is a thing that we live with in our daily lives. This is a structure that we use to get through the day. It's a very different lens. So it'll be interesting to see how those two things mesh.
And I understand the whole point is for you to think about, okay, well, what is magic in this context, right? But after 60 hours, I'm not here for them to still be yanking the chain around, be like, oh, it could be this, oh, it could be that. Okay, I'm ready for some concrete definition of what the story is, at least in some context.
Ooh, I don't know if we have any concrete things for you.
I don't need concrete, but I just don't need oh, it's a mystery, but what if it was more arbitrary, huh? Yeah?
We're not even halfway.
The story hasn't even started.
I really should have said that.
I get it, Capelli. I have that frustration as well in terms of what is magic, but in the end, I realize that the thing for me, the mystery part of it, is where I get the kick out of this. So a lot of this has been very much just superfluous in a lot of the things that I care about. It does move the story along and will influence people's decisions later, I'm sure. However, I do agree with you that I wish they would give us something a little bit more concrete, but at the same time, keep it up with the mystery aspect of it. Like, I want it to wrap up exactly one of these things, but not both, even though they're so both intimately entwined.
Yeah, these have been very, I wouldn't say fluff, but these have been very outside of the island heavy episodes. We had 2 back-to-back ones where it's been very much on the Ange Maria storyline, and I think we're about to get back into the island for most of the rest of this episode. So,
I know you said you wouldn't call them fluff, but imagine calling a group of bullying girls telling another girl to kill themselves fluff.
Classic fluff. I mean, really just lifts the soul. It's like eating popcorn when I read these parts.
Just a breezy read.
It's a breezy summer read. Yeah.
It's beach reads.
In Maria's room, after having returned from Rokkenjiima after the very young Ange denied Sakutaro's existence, Maria is crying and attempting to hold onto her belief in Sakutaro as more than just a stuffed animal. Maria laments that she can't take Sakutaro to school with her, and so he recommends that she take her 4 bunnies in the ceramic forest band in her pocket. Despite having been fine before Ange had become her friend, she's having trouble returning to only having her imaginary friends. She declares that she won't let any more humans come into her world. Maria Sorcier is now an alliance only between her and Beatrice. Maria laments that her mother and teachers have too much antimagic toxin to see her friends as anything but toys, but at least the convenience store owners can see and greet them. On the way home from one night, Maria accidentally loses her house key. After searching on the route from the store to her home multiple times, the convenience store clerk eventually contacts the police to come and help her. While hesitant to talk to police, as her mother had instructed her not to, Maria eventually gives them her mother's work phone number to call. However, the call goes unanswered for some time before someone finally picks up and reveals that Rosa is on a 3-day vacation in Sapporo with her boyfriend right now, and that they don't know how to contact her. Maria is forced to stay overnight in the police station, where the district welfare officer comes to talk to her. Only when she calls Maria, "You poor thing," does Maria for the first time wonder if her situation isn't okay.
Don't mind me. I'm just getting ready to be mad at Cal for introducing to the story at all. Because Rosa is the worst kind of parent in the world, and I have emotions. I have so much emotions.
Express your emotions, Capelli.
Oh, in due time.
Oh, that's ominous.
Do we still have one more paragraph before you get to express your emotions?
Oh, okay. Yeah, that was sinister.
I'll let the story come to a crescendo before unloading on the bitch that she is.
That's fair. I will say, just preemptively, I thought what happened at the end of episode 2 was cruel to Rosa, and I just felt like, man, it's so outlandish and wild, and I'm looking at it now and I go,
yeah,
no, never mind, I retract that. It's fine, that makes sense. Especially with Beatrice being the one doing it, with this entire thing with Beatrice's relationship with Maria. And, if Beatrice can see what's actually happening here and, be able to exact this revenge on Rosa from episode 2 when Maria's not watching to not, break that vision of her, I think it's one of the most sweetest comeuppance that Rosa could possibly get.
Yeah, y'all called her evil. I can't believe now you're regretting your choices. How you're like, oh yeah.
No, she's still evil. Hold on.
Vindicated. I am selfish. I am wrong. That's Beatrice's theme song.
I love it. Oh man. So, to the author's credit, there was a compelling bit of writing in here of the escalating panic that you felt alongside Maria as she was walking back and forth from the store to the home looking for that key. You could really, man, this poor kid, her mom's gonna go off, and what, she can't be stuck outside all night, and what's gonna happen? Her food's cold was the first thing that I thought. It's oh no, they gave her a hot meal. Yeah, that was a good bit of writing, to be fair. But goddamn, man. So I I love and hate humanity equally is usually what fiction tells me. And there's studies that say like reading makes you more empathetic and stuff, and it's because of things like this. I think like you can kind of see how things can collapse. I mean, the care that Maria's community shows for is so very heartwarming in the midst of this awful traumatic thing that this young girl is experiencing. She's very young at this point, right? Like, we don't know when this happens before 1986, but she was 9 in 1986, so very much a young child.
Based on what was said previously, it was a couple years, like up to 2 years beforehand, probably, so she could be 7, 8,
Yeah.
I think it's implied that it's not long before.
Well, the reason why I'm saying a few years before is because it's right after...
She has to learn all the evil stuff.
It's right after Ange said that Sakutaro wasn't real. And Ange says that the incident happened a few years after that.
Oh, okay.
So, I mean, there's obviously some fudging because Ange probably doesn't remember super well when that timeline happened. So, and also we've established the author is not super great about ages and timelines like this. So,
George, yeah, the shopkeeper was so good. He was making sure that she ate a warm meal, then asking her leading questions, but without making her feel uncomfortable, and letting her go again rather than holding her there, and just making sure that when she came back, because it's kind of inevitable that she was going to come back if she'd already been back like 3 times at this point, that there was somebody there ready to help rather than making her panic in that moment. I mean, we knew that she was panicking slowly, but the way the shopkeeper dealt with that was phenomenal. I mean, it really made me think about how even in our day-to-day lives, maybe we witness something and we're like, should I be intervening here? Maybe not. Like Maria generally presents as a healthy, happy, clean. They know Rosa's a single mom, so they'd probably made a lot of allowances for her being a very absent parent and assuming that she was truly off working. And so like, okay, it takes the village to raise a child, like we'll all pitch in. But then this was a tipping point for her, for the village, for the community. I thought it was really well written and conveyed.
I think that is one of the strengths that the author has, is he does a really good job of writing the settings, right? The idea of this community coming through and the way that he presents the story, and the women are laughing at Sakutaro and her backpack peeking out and how cute, but they still understand this is not right, but they take care of the kid. There's I'm trying to think of like some other good examples of how they do it, just like how the island works in general, Rokkenjiima. I just, makes sense. And the way that he brings it to life with just some minor characters and stuff, I do enjoy that a lot too.
Yeah. In my notes, I went on a bit of a tangent rant about, the foster care system and how it's completely fucked and how we don't always make those phone calls when maybe we should. I don't think that this is really the place to get into it, but I just want to say this bit really made me think about all of that. So although I was saying up front that these things don't sit with me necessarily beyond the reading, like these are the things that I think about at the time or as I reflect on them afterwards, and I'm gathering my notes for the podcast recordings, and I think it is a true sign of really good writing when it does make you think beyond the realms of the world that you are living in and apply it to your own.
And Kyle did say a lot of people theorize that the author worked in social services for children, and in this segment especially between Maria and Ange, it's this was written by somebody who definitely gets it, if not has seen it firsthand.
One thing before I let you move on to Becca's note, it's also I think important to remember that Rosa has taken steps to deliberately instruct Maria to act misleadingly. She knows that people would step in, so she's like, don't go to these stores too many often. So the amount of knowledge and care that this one store owner shows is probably several that she visits just as much, right? She's probably goes to this one this day, then this day, and this day, one every 3 days or something like that. So each of them probably didn't get the full picture. They probably thought, oh, she only comes in, twice a week. Is that so bad?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. So easy to do. It's scary.
And she doesn't know any better because she's just trying to be a good daughter and listen to her mama and not get in trouble.
Yeah.
Yeah. I had the same note about Maria's meltdown, like the way that he writes the stream of consciousness of her slowly building panic as she realizes the key isn't there, the way she starts, like, you're just reading her thoughts. You're not reading objectively what's happening. You're reading her spiraling thoughts as she starts to panic and realize that things might be out of her control because she has so little control. Like, I think that's something every child is painfully aware of when you're a child, is like, maybe not consciously, but you know that you're not the one in control, and that if something is to go wrong, you're not equipped to handle it and somebody needs to help you. So, like, for her to lose her key and to immediately just not know what to do and to just want to have a tantrum and have a meltdown, yeah, it's so sad to read. And genuinely, I wish I had somebody who was always on my shoulder every time I wanted to have a tantrum and melt down and lay down on the floor and stop moving. That would just encourage me to say, hey, you can get through this, but you have to take action. You can't just sit here. Which I thought was actually really interesting if we're thinking about this from the point of view as like Sakutaro is her imaginary friend that she is giving voice to,
right, that
she would have that level of awareness at such a young age. And maybe it's something that she has slowly realized over time, but she still has to voice it through. It still has to come through this like conduit that she sees as not herself for her to internalize it.
Yeah, definitely.
I wonder if that's why she has such a childish personality, is because in the mystery perspective, she has offloaded all of her like serious, mature thoughts into these other personalities to help, guide her towards better action. And so the Maria that we see is what's left, the one that hasn't learned these lessons, the one that is just trying to be as innocent as possible because she's offloaded that capacity onto Sakutaro and her other friends.
Rosa really robbed her of her entire childhood by making her parent herself, basically. So she has had to come up with her own strategies to be her own parent. And I think Sakutaro, assuming there's no magic, is part of that strategy.
I think there's a little bit of humor in it too, because we've seen, as we saw in the last reading and this reading too, she's able to take care of herself. She's able to walk to the store. She's able to feed herself, but she also still is completely lacking any kind of self-regulation. Like, she's clearly playing with her toys in front of everyone she meets and giving them voices. And in the last reading, she goes to the store and she's like, I'm going to buy a real dinner, but then she ends up with sweets and soda. And you just have to think, like, if that happened this time, is this happening almost every time? And is that why the shopkeeper is pushing real food on her this time? So it's, Maria's kind of unstuck in time almost. She's both adult. She's got adult responsibilities, but child impulses.
Yeah, man.
And I think we see a lot of it in this reading we're about to get to, when Rosa I think she kind of sees that for the first time. And that's why she responds so negatively because I think she kind of sees oh, I've messed this kid up real bad. Even in the moment where I'm torturing her stuffed animal, she's still voicing it, pretending to be in pain. A lot of this it's tough to get through.
Yeah.
But she also refuses, we'll get there, but she refuses to take any responsibility for it at all. She's just why can't you be normal?
Yeah. Well, because you did that, bro.
Yeah.
So you said about the author telling, we had the writings of what Maria's internal dialogue was, and this really goes back to that whole show don't tell in literature, right? He didn't describe what was going on around. We didn't have any weird intermissions and flashbacks and anything like that. And that's when like that's when the gold sort of comes out of the writing in here. So he's clearly capable, but needed an editor.
Yeah. So I just thinking through this, I'm like, okay, how many times have I said this character is irredeemable, piece of shit, garbage, and like more stuff comes out. And it's like, well, okay, with this context, I'm trying to wonder what that would be for Rosa here at this point. And the only thing that I can imagine that kind of adds to that nuance is if our theories about Maria's father is correct. And it's like, oh, that puts on a load of a mental burden, emotional burden on somebody, to the point where every time you look at your child, you can't help but be reminded of trauma and just like horrible shit that you've been through. That doesn't justify it, but it's just like, okay. So I'm trying to think of like, what can this author present me with? That kind of makes me second guess these takes that I have.
I do think that we're going to get more about Rosa's backstory at some point, because even though we've gotten a little bit, I think we've gotten a decent amount of like Eva, and not terribly much of like actual, like we've seen Rosa nowadays, and we know that there has to have been some really terrible shit. However, I think that Rosa's backstory is going to inform a lot of what we're seeing right now. Like, and again, that doesn't mean that it's okay. It's not. It's very much not okay. But I think it makes for amazing storytelling.
Yeah.
For what we're seeing right now. And I can see that whatever has driven Rosa to be the way that she is, this two-faced bitch of a mother, means that something drove her to be this way. And we still haven't seen that something yet.
I think two-faced is a great way to put it, because the
Mm-hmm.
moments where she tries to be a good mom, it's like, okay, like the capacity is there, but what prevents her from committing to that?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Of all the siblings, Rosa is the most fucked up from how I have been perceiving the story so far, but we don't know why. Really, the only person we really have a good understanding of is Eva, who I don't know who was at the bottom of my list between the two of them. So eventually we're going to get Kraus, and eventually we're going to get Rudolph. And I have some theories on Rudolph, but at what point do you hold an adult responsible for the trauma they had as a child?
Right.
If they were never given the resources to cope and grow and understand and overcome it. It's a hard question to have, especially in the context of a fictional story.
I honestly think that when you're an adult, like, part of being an adult is acknowledging those things and getting help for them.
Yes.
I don't think that there's any, like, Rose is immature right now to me.
Yeah.
Like, she's not an adult yet because she hasn't addressed those things within herself. But
she still has the capacity to really hurt and abuse other people. So do you hold them responsible because they have that capacity themselves? But like, but at what point is that line drawn?
There isn't.
Do we know how old Rosa is? We'll say at the start of chapter 1.
That is a question I don't know if we actually have an answer for.
Ages don't exist in this reading.
Yeah.
If she's 26 to 30, which is kind of how it seems, she was a teenage mom in a family who didn't give much of a shit about supporting her, from how it seems. So what hope did she have? And back in the 80s especially, you can get all historical and like what therapy existed back then.
Yeah, and Japanese culture, there's a lot of stuff that factors. Yeah.
Again, it's not justifying anything, but it is like, yes, we want to hold them to a standard, but at what point are they held to it? Like, if they had no hope, it's just shitty through and through.
I don't know. We all have choice. We all have agency. I don't have I just think that she is responsible for her actions, full stop. Regardless of what happened to her, we all have a choice. You know?
That's a hard agree. Yeah, it's just like, at what point do you allow empathy? Like, let's say if you were a person in this world and you interacted with these people and you could help them, it wouldn't be easy. At what point are you empathetic enough to try versus admonish versus care more about the kids in the story to help them. These are like the sort of questions that I like to wrestle with myself a little bit, because that's more of like, as a parent, there will be days where there are kids that get put into my life that I do not have a relation to, that I have to decide if, how, and when to help.
I mean, for me, if I was in that story, and like, it would be, my empathy would be that, like, it's so in my real life, like, I have empathy for people for forever. Doesn't matter what you've done. If you are genuinely trying to reconcile and make amends, and
I like to quote you on something you said recently. I love and hate people equally. And to quote you now, I'm very empathetic.
I mean, empathy cuts both ways.
Yeah, I do love and hate people equally. Like, I can see...
People have to be doing the work to earn it, though.
Yeah.
They have to be actively trying to reconcile with any harm they've caused.
Yeah.
And go forth in not trying to cause more harm. There are people who never do that.
Yeah.
And
don't even try.
Yeah.
Don't even make the first step. Don't even see that they have done anything wrong, which is what we're going to see in the next scene, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm assuming that I would hope that there would come a point where Rosa acknowledges that she is at fault for the way that this situation went down. And as soon as she makes that realization, or like, I would even want to help her have that realization, because I don't think anybody is truly evil. I don't like hurt people. I don't think that there would be anybody that I would truly write off as, oh man, I'm saying that. Do I believe it? I'm just like, there are certain billionaires in the world.
Billionaires aren't people.
Kinzo, just think about Kinzo. Would you forgive Kinzo at this point?
There is a very small number of people, very small, that I wouldn't extend that grace to give them the opportunity to be better. I think almost absolutely everybody deserves an opportunity to be better.
Yes, I love how you say that. There is a line in The Good Place where one of the characters says something along the lines of, like, we've shown that humans strive to do better when given their resources, the opportunity.
Yeah.
So how can we judge people who've never been given that chance? Right? If we did, they would improve, but if they never had the chance, how can we judge them on that? And that's, that part of humanity is like, you don't get to know hardly anybody's full story.
No.
And you still got to deal with them. So in this context, with what we know about Rosa, has she been given that chance? Probably not, right? But
no, not yet.
She's young, like you said. Not an adult is somebody who has been given that chance and has made a decision one way or the other. And it's tough shit to wrestle with.
I think we should move on to this scene because I want to talk about it, but my last thought on it is, I think at this point in her life, she doesn't, like Hayley said, she has no recognition that she's doing anything wrong, even though she clearly knows that other people would frown upon it because she goes out of her way to have Maria do certain things. But then she's still going on 3-day vacations to Sapporo with her boyfriend, supposedly. We don't actually know that that's what's happening, but supposedly that's what's happening. And if she's just fucking off and leaving Maria on her own for 3 days and telling her not to talk to anyone so that no one else finds out about it and Maria is too young to know, she has the opportunity, but she doesn't have the recognition yet. So I look forward to seeing when that recognition comes.
Yeah, it's also interesting to take a look at like the things that we're learning now and try to look back on the events of episode 2, which is the one where Rosa was like the survived all the way to the end and like had the reconciliation with Maria at the end, which at the time we were kind of like, how legitimate is this?
Well, I mean, the whole thing of the end is that Maria earns or receives her mother's love at long last. Now, when you see a child like what we're seeing here, if she could orchestrate a situation to believe that her mother finally does love her, that just kind of adds to the tragedy.
Something to look forward to in your rereads in 2 years. So
Yeah, I definitely will have the time for that.
Season 2 of the podcast.
Capelli's gonna have child number 5 by that point.
No, I'm done.
Yeah.
Literally in 3 weeks, I'm getting the old.
Snip, snip. Congrats.
Fun.
Thank you? What a weird thing to be congratulated on.
Well, I mean, hey, like, I actually do think it's something congratulatory to a degree. Like, hey, good job on taking responsibility for your own biological functions as opposed to pushing that onto the women in your life. Kind of,
Exactly.
Yeah,
Yes, Kyle.
I agree. That's why I say congrats. Like, it's great. I love that.
It still feels weird to be congratulated for it.
It's fair. It's not unweird, for sure.
No, that's fair. Just let me know when Scissors Day is, and I'll send it to you. I'll send you scissors emojis.
Okay.
When Rosa finally does return, the welfare officer confronts her about leaving Maria alone so often. When Rosa tries to deny it, the officer reveals that Maria is well known throughout the shopping district as being a young girl with a lion stuffed animal that very often has to buy dinner for herself alone, late at night, and many of the shopkeepers are worried about her. Rosa tries to deflect, saying that she would love to be able to spend more time with Maria, but as a single mother and president of her company, she simply isn't able to. However, the welfare officer calls out her lies, noting that she has been on vacation in Hokkaido with her boyfriend for the last 3 days. All Rosa can do in response is derangedly scream in anger and denial. Then, however, noticing Maria watching from the other room, she goes to confront her about bringing the recognizable Sakutaro with her when shopping. Banging her fist against the wall while berating Maria, the welfare officer then attempts to intervene, but is thrown to the ground by Rosa. As Maria puppets Sakutaro, speaking back and forth defending each other, Rosa becomes even further enraged at the thought of Maria playing like that in front of other people. Despite the welfare officer pleading for her to stop interrogating her daughter, Rosa asks Maria if she brought any other weird things to play with in front of other people. When Maria reluctantly admits to having also brought the rabbits to school, Rosa, after confirming that they are in fact Maria's close friends, hurls one of them against the wall, destroying it. With a cold smile, Rosa says that every time Maria disobeys her from now on, she will break another one. The welfare officer is in disbelief at the cruelty Rosa is displaying towards Maria. Rosa yells back at her, "I'm hurting too, you know. Who's going to take responsibility for my wounds? Well, who? I told you to bite your tongue." Maria even steps in, telling her mother to be angry at her and not the welfare officer. Rosa screams at Maria for not being able to make any real friends despite her age, and snatches Sakutaro away from her and smashes him against the wall over and over again. However, even then, Maria continues to voice Sakutaro. Rosa blames Maria playing with Sakutaro for Maria not being able to make friends, and says that she should never have given her this disgusting stuffed animal. Pulling at a seam with both hands, Rosa tears Sakutaro in half, his cotton stuffing spilling out like guts. Then, through Rosa's face, the evil being stated it clearly. Sakutaro is dead. In the meta world, Maria sobs and begs Beatrice to revive Sakutaro. However, Beatrice says that since Sakutaro is Maria's furniture and his vessel was created and then denied by Rosa, she is unable to revive him. In her grief, Maria begs Beatrice for magic that will allow her to get revenge on the bad witch possessing her mother. Seeing that Maria's grief is likely to tear her apart if she doesn't find an outlet for it, Beatrice reluctantly agrees to teach Maria dark magic.
Fuck you, Kyle. Making me read this story. Who do you think you are?
I warned you. I said ahead of time. Hey.
I think like 10 minutes after I read the section where like Sakutaro was introduced, I messaged you and I was like, something's gonna happen to this little stupid doll and I'm gonna be very heartbroken.
Yeah, weird how he doesn't show up on the island at all. It's her best friend. I guess she forgot it that day.
Oh, man. Hayley made a great observation, a great comment about like when somebody is an adult versus like just an old child. And like there is a part where Rosa is literally just stamping on the floor.
Yeah.
Right? She doesn't physically hurt any human. She doesn't slap around Maria or anything like that, which is like, I'm sure she was slapped around as a kid herself. So to not at least pay that forward, I guess just in this moment, because even on the island, she does hit her kid.
Yeah, that's what's interesting. She doesn't hit her here, but she does hit her later. So maybe that's an escalation, or who knows, yeah.
Well, but also the social worker's there, right?
True.
This is not a fully developed person.
She's still violent, though. Like,
oh, yeah.
Banging on the wall, right? That still has an impact.
It's still abuse. It just doesn't leave a physical scar.
Yeah, and I really love the social worker stepping in there, because the social worker, like, the way that it's written, you see the social worker seeing that specific action and be like, no, that is a step too far, and goes to physically intervene because you could recognize that is violence that is hurting the child. That was already something worth physically intervening for. Of course, that social worker then gets thrown on the ground by Rosa. I don't know why Rosa's not arrested after that, but sure.
There's still time.
That's true. Maybe the next scene is her going to Kenzo and be like, hey, I need some money for some litigation that's coming my way.
Yeah, she's part of a rich family, who knows. Like, there's a point where I was like, why are you not stepping in sooner? And it's very much written as, like, the social worker is dumbfounded. She can't believe what is happening. And then when she snaps out of it and steps in, or tries to. Why doesn't the social worker have a portrait? You know, why is it this random art professor?
That would give away the secret reveal that it's actually Beatrice.
Oh my god.
I mean, who really thinks it's a good idea to go off on a social worker like that? Like, she must be, like, since it's truly unhinged behavior.
Well, it's a temper tantrum, and you don't think clearly because you're not a developed human being.
Well, she got her hand caught in the cookie jar, right? Like, this was the moment where, like, she's been trying to avoid this situation for years, it seems like.
Yeah.
And, like, everything just came down. Like, suddenly she came home and she's, like, so fucked. The police were called on her child, who has been notably going around places, shown obviously by herself. Like, everything that she thought she was getting away with has now been shown. No, people know and are judging her.
Yeah.
Yeah. Man. And, like, she says in there, like, who's going to take care of my wounds?
Ugh.
So we know we know from before that she's hurt, but it's like, that's part of being an adult. You acknowledge that it is on you to take care of your wounds now. Your child can't do that for you.
So I'm like, I know we all love to talk about timelines here.
Mm-hmm.
How much before the start of the actual story, the trip to Rokkenjiima, was this scene from there? Because why the fuck is Maria still with Rosa? Like, if there was a social worker to look at that, like, I just want to know, like, if it was even allowed that Maria was supposed to be there in the first place. Like, it's one of my biggest problems with the scene is, like, this is showing somebody is a witness to this.
Mm-hmm.
And we already know Rosa does not have the money she needs. They wouldn't be going to Rokkenjiima if she had the money. So why is Maria still with Rosa and not getting care from some sort of public official, even if it's not good? And maybe someone can enlighten me.
I've got 3 theories.
Oh, that's so
One
many.
is, like, this is very, very, like, right before. Right, so before action can be taken, she takes Maria away.
Sure.
2, what did she actually do? She broke a toy, right? And in that, I accidentally knocked over the social worker, so that it becomes a he said, she said, and that can become a drawn-out litigation thing. And 3, she is just part of a wealthy family, right? Even if she herself does not have wealth, the idea of going up against the Urashima name, you know, can cause a lot of stuff that maybe the social worker's boss is like, gotta drop this, or maybe it's just a first strike incident, and they're doing visitation. You know, like, one thing that I've learned in my work in healthcare is, like, a lot of excuses for abusers to get away from shit unless it's, like, directly witnessed physical abuse and damage.
And that is something that gets brought up a lot in Higurashi as well. There's a lot of sub-themes in Higurashi about child abuse and how hard it is to deal with it through official channels, especially when there are competing political factors involved. That's a major plot line in Higurashi. And
it's the early 80s, so a lot of support systems in place don't have the power that they do today.
Yeah, it makes sense. The social worker thread itself feels weird to me, even if it, like, means that there's somebody there to witness it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm willing to bet we're going to get a little bit more information on that in our next reading.
I hope so. I hope it's not just dropped, because the fact that some public officials saw it and, like, isn't at least making an inquiry into the house, like, maybe that's why they're not separated yet, and I put yet in metaphorical quotation marks. But the fact that somebody saw them means that there could be some sort of house call, some sort of something. So it just the whole thing was, in my opinion, actually was very well written, and, like, really made you just kind of as dumbfounded as this social worker in a sense, except for you had the background on what was going on in some sense.
Mm-hmm.
So It was very good, very good, very well written. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, it was. And kind of falling back to Capelli's point about the trauma that Rosa went through and the origins potentially of Maria. And Capelli, I think you'd have missed this last 4.2. We were talking about how I think it's possible that Rosa is a sex worker, and this whole scene here now has made me think that even more, and that because she is so insistent that she was working for those 3 days that she was away, right? And she would have the right connections, she would have been in the right network for the people that would pay a lot of money for that, and that her design business is potentially just a cover, and the way that she actually earns any money is through sex work.
Which is why we don't know who Maria's father is.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. I'm really way more convinced having gone through this bit of reading now. Like I can, oh man, this is so gross, but I can really picture there being demand for, one of the Urashiramiya daughters, who would be considered pretty untouchable to be touched, essentially. And there would be a lot of money in that. Yeah. I do wonder if, and I mean, maybe there's even darker layers to it that involve Kinzo as well. But I think that's at least part of what is going on here with Rosa. I really, really hope that we get more of her backstory. Like, maybe she's genuinely mentally unwell and has no control over that. Or maybe this is all like her feeling like she has the way that she reacts just feels like it's something that she deems as so completely necessary to her and Maria's survival that the hoops that she has made Maria jump through in order to keep this cover for her for a number of years. Either she is quite unwell, and or there is a lot more going on there than most people know about, I think.
Well, mental health, definitely good mental health runs in the family. We can say that for
sure. Yeah. I'll wait until everybody's finished, but before we move on to the next section, I do have like a little bit of levity to add to the end of this.
I mean, I agree with that read very much, because it is, like you say, for her to double down so hard insistently on like, you have no right to question me, I was working, is, yeah, it's harrowing. But then there's also a part of me, I like your read better, but there was also a piece of me that was reading this as the way that Rosa always talks about Maria, especially in this scene, is only ever in relation to how Maria reflects on Rosa herself. Like, everybody thinks you're this weird kid. Everybody thinks that I'm a bad mother, and I cussed out the school for her, and I was in the wrong because she was actually taking her toys to school. She made me a liar. Like, all of these things kind of feed into Maria makes Rosa look like a bad mother. And there could be multiple reasons for that. Like, she could hate that feeling because she tries so hard to just scrape together enough ends meet to provide for her, that the idea that she's being perceived as a bad mother by all these different parts of society everywhere Maria goes is like really painful to her, and compounds on the suffering that she's going through in order to provide. Or is it a pride thing? It's no way to know until we find out. But I just thought she's never in this scene, and I think a lot of the time that we see her, except for in the scenes where she is being really apologetic to her, most of what we see of their relationship is her thinking about Maria in terms of herself and not in terms of she is a child with needs. So
yeah,
good observations.
Very selfish.
The thing that I think broke me the most in this scene is when I kind of make the connection that Maria's ooze are a mashup, a slice up, a bastardization of Sakutaro's Uryu. And like she was like in the moment trying to speak like Sakutaro as he's getting destroyed, and her brain just makes that connection. That's why she has that vocal tick now. And I'm just like, there's that last bit of humanity I had. We can get rid of that. I don't need that anymore. I'm broken.
It's the hold the door of Umineko.
Kinda.
It is. It is. Damn.
Maria is just Hodor.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe just no. Don't say it.
Hayley, you have to say it now.
No, you have to. Like, if I say it, then you've got to not include it.
Just leave it, Kyle.
Just put it in our chat. Just put it in the group chat.
That's also make it in writing. That's even better.
Yeah, right.
Shut up, Kyle.
Not at all damning.
Hold on, I gotta get my screenshot software ready.
Mm-hmm.
Oh dear. I mean, so that bit of levity to add just before we move on to the next section. So the way Maria screamed Beatrice was so much like Hinzo. It woke me up so hard. I mean, I was already awake for this scene, but like, man, it was so funny. She is truly her grandfather's granddaughter. And that's the kind of thing that you're missing out with in the voiceovers, Ben. Like, it was the pitch, everything was basically the same, it felt like.
All right, before we move on, there's one note I noticed that we didn't talk about, which was that, Becca, you had something about Maria's friends being rabbits.
Oh, I forgot about that. Okay, I just thought it was interesting that her favorite animals are the rabbits and the Chiester sisters are bunny ladies.
Mm-hmm.
Especially if we're circling back on Maria Donnet. Interesting.
At the end of episode 3, they were like protecting Maria. They were like, "Don't come near Lady Maria," I think they said.
And weren't there 3 bunnies like before, and then one broke, so there were only 2? No?
There were 4, and then one is broken, so there's 3 left.
But why are there only 2 Chiester sisters then?
Well, I mean, maybe Maria's been a perfectly good girl since between then and the future, and
absolutely not.
Yeah.
I'm not saying there's a direct correlation. I just thought it was interesting.
Yeah.
I totally missed on that.
I need a 5-page paper on my desk by Monday, Becca.
I'll take an F. Thanks.
But the collective responsibility, Becca.
You're gonna make us all fail.
Yeah, try make me write a letter of regret. I dare you.
Oh man, my developed brain won't be able to do that.
Returning to the present, in the future timeline, Ange awakens from a nap on a boat headed for Niijima. Amakusa asks her if she thinks she'll be able to find the truth in Maria's diary, or from interviewing people in Niijima. Ange says that she doubts it. This trip is merely a journey of self-satisfaction, so she can tell herself that she did investigate it. Amakusa asks her what she plans to do once she has done so. Ange says that once she finishes her investigation and lays some flowers on Rokkenjiima, she'll be done, and she hasn't thought about anything after. Amakusa says that, in the end, self-satisfaction is what is important, because, after all, the only one capable of truly creating that satisfaction inside of you is yourself. Ange thinks back on Maria's diary, and how, despite all the apparent sadness around her, it was Maria herself that decided that she was happy. Ange realizes that it isn't up to her to decide if magic exists or not for other people. She apologizes to Mammon for the way that she treated the Seven Sisters of Purgatory, and for denying Maria's magic when she was a child. Well, Ange had forgotten about that fight right away. Thinking of witches and magic as just another game to be played with and discarded, that was Maria's whole life. Maria had wanted to share that joy with the young Ange, and Ange had trampled on it in her innocent cruelty.
Kyle.
Uh-huh.
I really feel like you didn't give that whole scene the Amakusa airtime on this podcast that it deserves. It's like one line. How dare you?
Well, because they repeat the same thing 16 times. Yeah. Oh, now we're okay at repetition when it's Amakusa doing it. I see how it is.
Yes, exactly that. That's exactly how it is.
This podcast repeats things? Never seen it.
Everything in Umineko.
The
is a
story
repetition.
repeats things?
Huh?
Wait, just to clarify, the story repeats things?
In other words.
All right, I'm done.
Kyle hates us. So there's some slivers of gold, right? I actually think that there were quite a few of them in this particular reading. This is another one. I really strongly and wholeheartedly agree with that self-acceptance thing being the path to a happy and fulfilling life. Like, you have to do that. You have to embrace all of your... I'm not saying that means that you like have a massive ego or anything, but it means that you embrace all of the things that are wrong about yourself and commit to working on them as well. You know, this is very much, it feels like a theme of this read with Rosa and everything. I said I liked Maria from the beginning, and I couldn't articulate why at that point, and I think it's because I didn't really know her, but I think this is why. Like, she is fine with who she is and doesn't really make apology for it, despite her mother being so determined to ply her with all manner of insecurities, you know. And okay, we see now some of them, like the vocal tic that she has and where that originated. But it's why I like her. It's why I like Beato as well. It's all the self-assuredness, and I think that this scene did a really nice job of sort of laying that out for us. It's frustrating to watch everybody else. That's why seagulls are on my list, because they're all so deeply insecure. And seagulls are probably just, you know, chill. And, you know, they know what they are. They know what they're there for.
Yeah, it goes back to what we were saying in the last little summary breakdown, right? Where, you as an adult are responsible for yourself. This is kind of the flip side of that. You are responsible for not only taking care of yourself and your own mental health, but the only person who determines your happiness, ultimately, is you.
Yep, exactly.
Amakusa knows what's up.
Yeah, he does.
Yeah, he does. I think the one thing that was kind of tickling my brain about this in terms of the Maria of it all, because she is very self-assured, and I fully accept this weird limbo space that the story is kind of entering, where it's like magic can be real to you and not real to me. It's fine. It's wrong for me to dismiss Maria's happiness because that's what she's created for herself. I think the only thing that makes it a little bit sticky for me is that Maria is also willfully... Well, I guess she's also a child. So it's like, how much of it is willful versus obliviousness because she doesn't know any better? But she's also, to a point, willfully ignorant, like ignoring the way that Rosa reacts in certain situations, like in the last reading when she saw the receipt of her going to the hot springs and Rosa snatched it away from her, and Maria doesn't think about it, but Ange does. And I think there's a way for Maria to still believe in magic and to still have this happiness and self-assuredness while still being more aware of some of the stuff that her mother does. But thinking about this now, it is maybe just because she's a child and she doesn't have that recognition.
Yeah, it's a little black and white the way they're painting it right now, where it's like, don't touch Maria's happiness.
Yeah.
It can never be improved. It can only be what it is. Don't try to improve her situation at all. Just let her be in delusions. It's like, yeah, maybe there's a middle ground where we also arrest Rosa and let her still believe that she wasn't a bad person after you arrest her.
Yeah, she can still believe that her mother is getting taken over by an evil, two-faced witch version of her mother, but, like, recognize the bad stuff still. I don't know.
Yeah, she dies when she's 9 years old, right? So she'll never get the opportunity to do that, unfortunately. But yeah, she is just a child. But I generally and genuinely like children. I think for that very reason, you know, I like it when they just are outspoken and say shit that it really is just socially completely unacceptable. I love kids for that.
That's the best part of kids. Yeah,
for sure.
And you didn't really touch on this in the summary, Kyle, but when she has the conversation with Mammon after Amakusa leaves her, she's trying to explain this concept to Mammon about why humans need this happiness and this self-satisfaction. And at first she starts talking about it in the sense of like, well, you wouldn't want to die feeling unfulfilled. And something that Mammon comes back with is, so humans are basically just living so that they can die well. Like, isn't that kind of contradictory? Because then you're not really focusing on living, you're focusing on how you're going to die eventually. And R.I.P. Mammon, you would have loved Lana Del Rey, Born to Die. But like, because I also at that point was like, I don't like the way that Ange is spinning this, but then it got better from there.
Yeah, it's also probably tinged with a lot of like, there's some Japanese traditional like ways of thinking, I think, that's also applying into that. Also, I mean, Andy's also depressing as fuck, so it's certainly possible there's some of that leaking in there, where it's like, oh yeah, we've lived to die. Yeah, I could see where Angie might come away with that from the way she's lived.
Yeah, but otherwise, Amakusa, what a fucking man.
Mm-hmm. Love him. Need more.
For real.
Need
God,
more.
So confident. Confident armchair philosophy. He's building her up. He's recognizing that she needs to think about stuff, so he's giving her space, picking up on her needs, even when she's like, I feel fine, why is he leaving? But then she has to go down her little mental spiral and talk to all of her imaginary friends. So she did need that time alone. He knows her. You know what? I feel like we don't know anything about any of these characters is the one thing that I've learned through this reading. So I'm sure there will probably be some other shoe to drop about Amakusa later. So right now I'm just fully enjoying him being the hottest shit on the planet right now. Great job, Amakusa.
I'm so with you. He's great.
How long till he dies?
Capelli.
And I say that because Angie herself is like, someone who lives the life that he lives, like they don't stick around, right? Like they take risks, and eventually
he's gonna catch a stray bullet.
Exactly, and that's what we're gonna see on Rokkenjiima in 1980 or 1994, whatever it is, 1996,
98,
with Kyrie's sister arming up.
So I just want to say, I think it's ridiculous how much you love Amakusa when you know nothing about him, which is very unlike the way that I feel about Dr. Nanjo and his wonderful backstory that we've gotten a ton of, and I will live and die for that character.
Yeah, I bet he's very philosophical. He plays chess. I mean, he talks to Kinzo.
Exactly.
You mean the backstory where he clearly is helping out the witch side?
Yes.
Ben, you and I are holding space for each other and our delusions.
Exactly, thank you.
Angie decides this journey is not only to discover the truth of what happened 12 years ago, but also to apologize to Maria for what she said to her on that day. While she has no basis for the thought, she truly believes that if she hadn't hurt Maria like that on that day, that mysterious incident several years later that took her family's life would not have happened. No, instead of flowers, Angie has a much more fitting gift in mind for Maria. Angie uses her magic to summon Sakutaro, first time she has done so on her own, and apologizes to him. And not just him, she summons and apologizes to all 7 Sisters of Purgatory. While she may not personally believe in magic, magic certainly exists for those who believe. Angie's anti-magic toxin fully vanishes, and she comes to respect and accept the belief of others. While she will continue to deny witches that try to intrude on her world, she refuses to deny so for worlds outside of her own.
I don't know how I feel about that. Like, and I don't know if I fully processed it yet, but like, I don't know. I want to like Angie more than I currently do, and I'm interested to see where this goes. But I loved her when she first appeared, but then just, I don't know. I'm kind of with Capelli on, like, I don't love that magic as a belief system is real, and I'd rather just believe that these are all in her head and she's okay with that sort of thing, like as a coping mechanism for what's going on.
I mean, I think from her perspective, that is what she believes. She believes that these are all just her delusions.
Yeah, so then what's the rest of it then? Is my eternal question that I have not been able to answer, and maybe once the story starts we can answer it, so we'll see.
Yep, that's basically my notes on this section, is just, logical fallacies are Angie's thing to cope. Okay.
I don't mind this whole magic as a belief system thing. I wanted to say it earlier when you were talking about it, Capelli, but I think this is, it's kind of like religion, right? Like, if we compare it to the real world, it's like, okay, like, I don't I accept your religion, that's cool for you, but it's not for me. I'm glad you're happy with your god or gods and, think that they're responsible for landing the plane safely and not the flight crew. Cool, but I think it was the flight crew, thanks. And I think that's where Ange's at.
You just actually reminded me, because when I was talking about the Born to Die thing before, that was also what I was thinking, is that it's like religion, where people live their lives because they want to have a good afterlife. They have this belief in where they're going to end up after they die. And I completely forgot to mention that before, because it was just floating around in my brain. So thank you for reminding me of that. But yeah, I feel like that's kind of where this is heading. And I like it too.
Yeah, it doesn't bother me.
Religion's a great comparison that I had not thought of before. And I think it gives me good context to show why I'm not interested in it, in this story. How many stories do you know where divine intervention, like as an answer or a solution to a problem, is well-written, satisfying, or interesting? Rare, if at all.
Well, the religion angle is only from the mystery angle, right? Like, religion is our way of justifying this belief in terms of a thing that is not real. Tips Fedora. But from the magic side, obviously, like, if Angie is wrong, then all of her imaginary friends are legitimately real, and they're just, like, oh, she'll come around eventually when she figures out that we are in fact real and talking to her.
Sure, and that's kind of why I have realized that I'm more team mystery, is team fantasy being the rationale is what you see is what you get, and I'm not impressed with what I see and get, therefore. And so if you tell me that team mystery is, it's religion or equivalent, I'm just like, this is why I'm team sci-fi. All right, I make my own joy in what I want the genre to be.
Your self-satisfaction, yeah.
Which is in theme with what the story wants, right? So,
I would say I don't know how much I agree that it's like religion, because how often do you see someone and go, I don't really believe in your religion, but you're allowed to believe it, and then you turn right around and go pray? That's basically what Ange is doing by summoning these imaginary characters in her head. Like on the teen mysteries, if you're like just looking at it from a perspective of like what is happening right now, is that she is saying, you're allowed to believe that. That's great. I love that. And then turns around and goes, can you believe that they believe that to your imaginary friends?
That is the foundation of modern Christianity with all the denominations that there are.
But I don't think that that's why it's a good comparison in this case, because we're actually getting feedback from it.
Interesting. That's fair.
I think it's less about like literally religion and more about the nature of faith and the different ways that different people use faith in different things to cope and get through. Like, it's more about what do you believe and why, and where is that coming from? Which I think Lost does incredibly well, and I'm a giant Lost ending defender. So
you and me.
Man, you're like, I feel like it's been so many episodes now where Lost has come up, and now I feel like I need to actually go and finish it.
You didn't?
Oh, Hayley, Lost is like...
We should talk about this later, because I could go on.
Same.
It's a good thing that this was a short podcast.
Yeah. To start this out even longer, I do want to note, so from the mystery perspective, Angie is experiencing fully sentient manifestations of personalities in her head, right? She is like full-blown Tulpas of all the Seven Sisters and Maria and Sakutaro. Like, that experience is very real to her. Have we talked about Tulpas before and like what they are? Do y'all know what Tulpas are?
I know what they are. I just watched Twin Peaks.
Yeah. They basically are like imaginary friends that you've focused on so thoroughly that they literally feel like separate consciousnesses that manifest. You can picture them, and they are functionally visualized in your own head as a separate being, and they can talk to you. So there is actually groundwork for, on the mystery side of this stuff, being very, very real to the person experiencing it, which is just interesting.
I would say, I can't remember if it was Capelli or Ben, sorry, but it's like, how many times have you said that to someone and then like turned around and prayed? I am very much agnostic. I have done that. I'm not an atheist. I think there's something. I don't know what. I hate religion, truly. Can't subscribe to any of it. But yeah, I will turn around and just like put messages out into the universe, and maybe it's just like an internal monologue, right? So like that goes to that thing you're saying about the whole imaginary friend becoming so real.
Yeah,
like it's the conversation with yourself is kind of prayer is a conversation with yourself, really. Like,
I get that, and I see your point. I think my real point lies in, but you're getting actual feedback from it, from a neurological perspective of having voices in your head or like visions that you're seeing. That's not something that you can compare modern religion to, in my opinion. But I see the rest. I do see the rest of it, and I see the comparison.
Okay.
But I think that it doesn't fully explain the trauma that has put Maria and Ava and Ange in these positions of being able to visualize these other versions, other selves, other like demons in a sense, like the 7 stakes of Purgatory. Ava being able to visualize her younger self as somebody talking to her, because it's all through trauma.
Yeah, I've just had a thought. So I've just finished reading a N.K. Jemisin, I think it's called Dream Blood. It's a 2-part series, and so the first one is called Killing Moon, and the second one is Shattered Sun. And in this world that she builds, the women are like revered like goddesses on Earth. Kind of. I'm oversimplifying it. I am realizing that we are only really getting backstory for the women in this whole fiction. We have a little bit of backstory from the others, but it seems to be so far that it's through the eyes of the women that we understand the backstory of the others. We only see female witches so far, I think. Yes, okay, we've seen Genji and how have I already forgotten his name because I love him? Yeah, Ronave, thank you. Using magic and Canon. Oh my god, their names are just flying out of my head.
You're doing great.
We've seen Genji, Ronave, and Canon use magic, but we're also told that they are just furniture. So I'm just wondering if it's just come to me that maybe that is part of whatever this, if we're in Fantasyland, is this part of the structure, is that like women are the only ones that can truly wield the magic unless they bestow it upon someone, like is how it's implied is where Genji and Ronave and so on get their power.
Well, and George, like that, the only
Kinzo technically also did magic, yeah.
Well, Kinzo's the whole thing where Beatrice is like, he has no magical talent. How is he able to do this? He lit himself on fire. Like that's really the only magic we've seen him do in front of us.
I don't think he lit himself on fire. I'm pretty sure Beatrice lit him on fire.
I thought he did that to himself.
No, because it was part of the sacrifices. So I think Beatrice has to do the kill.
I don't remember where I saw or read it, but it was like in our little group chat or whatever. But the idea that only women can become witches, like, is that the case? And then it's interesting that Angie asked this, this professor, if you could be a witch, would you? And he said, "Oh, well, yeah, of course, but it's not real."
That conversation's so good. I'm glad that we're reading it slowly like this, because I've not actually gone back and reread episode 4 like this in a long time, because it's so heavy, and it's like, come on, let's get back to the island where like the actual stuff's happening, so like I don't linger on these parts very much. So I have been very much enjoying going back and seeing all this. But yes, Ben, we are going back to the island very soon.
Please take me back.
We have to go back.
Take me back.
We have to go back.
That's a Lost reference, isn't it?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know. I've never seen Lost. I was just saying that I've been saying this literally the entirety of episode 4 as I want to go back to the island.
Yeah.
That's how I felt on my first read through.
Sakutaro and the Seven Sisters are grateful for being revived and accepted once again. However, Ange wonders why she could summon Sakutaro, but Maria could not. While a vessel is useful for summoning, it isn't required, especially not for summoning someone you were so close with and had summoned many times before, as with Maria and Sakutaro. Sakutaro tells her that in the moment when Rosa had torn his stuffed animal in half, Maria had decided in her heart that Sakutaro had died. That wound in her heart would forever prevent her from being able to summon or see Sakutaro herself, even though Sakutaro had been right beside her even as she mourned him, his voice no longer able to reach her because she could not accept it. After that traumatizing event, the tone of Maria's diary had shifted drastically. No longer filled with happiness and spells to summon candies, but hatred, sadness, and magic to curse your enemies. The hole in Maria's heart remained unfilled, even up to her death. Ange wonders if she can somehow revive Sakutaro in Maria's world, if that could save her. However, without the one-of-a-kind lion-stuffed animal created by Rosa, it seems impossible. Regardless, Ange is determined to try. Everything will be settled on Rokkenjiima itself. With storm clouds brewing, Amakusa calls Ange to come back below deck. There he moves a heavy bag containing something Ange hopes he will not have to use. Flying into Niijima Airport, Sumadera Kasumi and her men make their way to Rokkenjiima themselves. In their own heavy bag, a black, blunt automatic pistol peeks out. And that is the end of this reading.
Why? I don't really understand how she figured out that that's where she was going. But to the point where she shows up herself and not like send her henchmen to go figure it out and do the work there. She's so certain, like to a point, it's like, okay, it happened because it's what they needed to do for the story.
Yeah, to a degree, there's some storytelling. Also, it's important to note that Sumadera Kasumi, she has been personally tasked with resolving the situation. Like, her family is bigger than just her, so she has taken the responsibility of like personally resolving this. And so I think part of that is why she has to like do it herself, is because if she doesn't, she will be the one having the green tea, if you will.
And last time they let Ange get away.
Yeah, they didn't expect that she would take the historian out to lunch instead of go to his house. I'm very interested to see where this goes, because I didn't expect a whole side plot in 1998. So I'm excited to see like Ange as she is now, plus Ange as she is talking to the Battler of 1986. Like, I think that's really neat, and I'm really excited to see what she finds there and how that affects, like, if Ange from 1998 is able to converse with Furniture Ange of 1986, because they're not the same person. We've already been talked about that at the end of the last episode. And is able to convey these things that she knows, that gives some hard truths for Battler to stand on to actually fight Beatrice with, which I think is really neat. Because Battler is, like, in neither of the three stories that we've seen so far, Battler is not very much, doesn't know basically anything. He somehow misses...
Battler is incompetent.
No, but, like, not even that he's incompetent, but he somehow misses all of the action that, like, goes on around him. And it's why he's such a compelling character, that he isn't able to speak to anything because he literally wasn't there for it.
Yeah.
So, like, to have some, like, hardcore proof of this is what this looks like 12 years later, use this to now help craft your theories. Not something you could have seen, but something that somebody 12 years later saw. That's interesting. And I like that.
Yeah, and we know that the truths of the future overwrite the truths of the past.
Yep. Truth of the present.
It's a Christmas miracle.
We got all three.
Truth of the future is going to come in when I edit this podcast and make you all say stuff that you didn't say.
No! Don't worry, I'll send I'll send audio file of Hayley's redacted joke to you.
Oh dear.
Next week, we'll be reading about 3 hours of the visual novel, ending with the line, "Women truly are noisy, pukuku," after which metal bars appear, which is videos 64 through 66 of the YouTube playlist.
What does that even mean?
That's Ronave.
No. Well, oh yeah, actually that makes sense if that is Ronave. My theory was that it was going to be Amakusa, because like that's the only person that we'd know enough about, like could speak about women like that. But no, but the Pukuku, like that's Ronave.
Yeah. I can't believe you would say that Amakusa would speak about women like that. No. Absolutely not.
Amakusa is a woman respecter.
Well, if you look at it, it's very much two different people talking here.
It's true. They are two different statements.
Oh, yeah. Oh.
I wonder if it's Battler talking with Renobe.
I think so.
Yeah, it's probably it.
Yeah. Metal bars. Have we seen that as like a cult yet?
No, we haven't. That's the thing that intrigues me the most, I think.
We've seen the bullet holes in glass. Oh my god, we're going to see them. We've got talk of guns. We know where that's going to happen now. We don't know where that's going to happen. Sorry.
What?
I'm reading this
What?
thought. We've seen guns now. I know we had seen like the old antique Kinzo's antique guns, but we've seen like actual like trained people with their guns peeking out. And so we've seen the shattered glass with the bullet holes as like a transition between time segments within the story. So maybe we're going to see the origin of the bullet holes in the transition scenes now that we've got guns on the island. Excited.
Well, once again, thank you all for joining me as we've talked this. We had some really, really good conversations at the time. I was actually, I thought it was going to be a really short one. We had a lot to say, actually. And it was very fun. Thank you all for joining us, and I hope you at home enjoyed listening to us ramble. And if you have anything you want to comment about things we said or things we may have missed, please say so on the Off Meta Discord or as a comment on YouTube. And of course, we will be talking about all those different things as we see them, but also in our message bottle segments. I'm sure the one for episode 4 is going to be interesting. So yeah, thank you all for joining us, and remember to think off meta.